Hi friends, welcome to the NPTEL course on Leadership for India Inc. Practical Concepts and Constructs. We are in week 3 discussing leadership for sustainable growth. In this lecture, we will consider global leadership. We have focused on 5 factors which are considered to be beyond and above what we think as the physical and financial performance of the company. These drive the leadership behaviors of the highest order. 1. Technology, 2nd. Climate, 3rd. Resources, 4th. Globalism, and 5th. Crisis leadership. We have considered in the previous 3 lectures technology, climate, and resources. In this lecture, we will consider global leadership. Despite the trends we have seen of certain degrees of protection on the part of certain developed countries and the shock of pandemic COVID-19, which has served to stop international travel, we cannot say that globalization is at risk. In fact, no country can ever be fully self-sufficient or self-reliant, and globalization as a systemic concept of industrialization will stay on. Different countries are at different stages and states in terms of development, market size, demographics, and resources. Material resources, as we have seen in the earlier lecture, are unevenly distributed across the globe, with high concentrations in a few countries in respect of many critical resources. At the same time, consumption markets are unevenly distributed as well. While developed markets offer a flat level of consumption market, emerging markets offer great potential of growth. On the other hand, technologies, financial resources, and means of production are concentrated in certain developed countries as well as in certain fast developing countries. In this paradigm of uneven distribution of factory inputs, production outputs, and consumption markets, globalization is the only phenomenon that can ensure an equitable development over a long term. It is therefore an essential part of a global economy. If at all, globalization of the future will be less on cost arbitrage and more on material and product flows with high quality standards, and with nations taking certain measures to mitigate the risk of excessive dependence on one or two countries. Until a few years ago, global leadership was seen as an extension of leadership, but with stronger emphasis on team motivation and the ability to manage multiple national cultures. But this is too simplistic a definition of global leadership. While leaders can meet globalization challenges with greater soft skills, that is not the only requirement. For that, we need to understand how a global corporation gets into being, how a global corporation is led, and what are the advantages and disadvantages, risks and opportunities facing global corporations. In this lecture, we will go through those facets with specific examples. Basing parts of value chain in a foreign country makes the firm global. That is also another simplistic thought process. Another simple way of looking at globalization that it is positively correlated with international trade. Performance of certain cross-border activities makes one a global leader. Global leadership is a function of experience in different countries and also a corporation or a leadership which merges with local cultures is a global leadership. But all of these statements are oversimplification of the paradigm of globalization and also global leadership. Certain observations which are drawn in this lecture from global research studies reflect that while there is heavy reliance on soft skill theory of global leadership, there is also the need for structural and economic drivers of globalization to be part of the global leadership paradigm. But first, let us look at the soft skills. There was a study which came in Harvard Business Review, which looked at 195 global leaders in 15 countries and 30 global organizations. It shortlisted top 10 requirements based on a list of 74 generic leadership competencies. And of these 10, 5 buckets of factors emerge. 1. Strong ethics and safety. 2nd. Self-organizing capability of the leader. Efficient learning of the leader. Ability to nurture growth, and connection and belonging. These are considered the 5 important soft skills for a global leader. If you look at these 5 top skills, you can identify certain key drivers of each of these skills. 1. If you look at ethics and safety, the leader has to create a safe and trusting environment for the followers. That becomes very important when a company operates in multiple geographies and multiple cultures. And also when people of different cultures join the multinational corporation or a global corporation. The firm which is operating globally must demonstrate compliance to core values and also the national systems so that the team members feel safe. It also has to communicate a mutually trusting environment. As far as the empowerment is concerned, the rules are the same as in any other model. Clear direction, but enable the followers to self-organize. Ability to let go the team members to develop a few things on their own, but also allow them to excel by themselves through some kind of mentoring and coaching. It requires the leader to work on oneself while developing the followers. Belongingness is exemplified by caring and connection, enabling the employees develop roots, frequent open communication, and leveraging the psychological needs of employees to belong. Ideation and learning, because the company is operating in several regions of the world, there are huge opportunities to learn and develop for the employees. Similarly, there are also opportunities for the leaders to learn from the experiences of different countries and jurisdictions, and the ability to demonstrate as a leader the need for learning and development through personal example, as also providing structural enablements for the other employees. That is key to ideation and learning. And as far as growth is concerned, development of followers on the career path, development of the next level of leaders, and also leveraging the innate desire in an individual to develop oneself. That is important. These are all good leadership skills, and they are brought into focus to a greater degree in a global context. But we need to look at the activity based approach as well. Global leaders typically work with colleagues from other countries. There are bound to be certain similarities and dissimilarities which they must understand how to manage. And this is more than just national difference or a cultural difference. It is the perspectives with which the leaders come from. If a leader is from a growth oriented company which is used to be doing things in a frugal but an agile manner, for example, a country such as India, the leader is likely to be quite different from a leader who comes from an evolved, mature Western organization style, wherein everything is taken step by step and with the due analysis and with the due safety measures. So there are going to be differences, and these differences cannot be called national differences. These are differences related to the economic environment in which those companies have come about. Global leaders understand how to interact with external clients from other countries as also internal clients from other countries, may need occasionally to speak a language other than their mother tongue at work. They should be able to supervise people of different nationalities, and in doing so understand the body language and the cultural moorings of communication, develop a strategic business plan on a worldwide basis for their unit, manage a global budget although it is allocated for the unit, negotiate in other countries or people from other countries, manage foreign suppliers or vendors, be open and be accepting of one vendor across the world for each specific activity, because the one firm concept operates, manage risk on a worldwide basis for their unit. There cannot be differences on how, let's say, cybersecurity is handled in an Indian unit vis-a-vis how it is handled in a US based unit. Therefore, the standardization that happens in the activities is one of the important aspects of global leadership. And global leadership typically tries to elevate the common multiple to the highest level rather than seek something which is very easy to adopt. That is where the challenge of working with different nationalities, different regions, different governments comes about. But as I said, these soft skills, these soft activities, these leadership approaches are relevant to some degree. But we also need to understand what are the typologies of global industries to understand further the impact on the global leadership. We can classify all the industries, in my opinion, in 6 particular types of industries. The first is the knowledge intensive services. Services which deal with information technology, professional services, financial intermediation, for example. Industries which have concentrated innovation: computers, electronics, electrical and communication equipment, automobiles, aerospace, chemicals, and pharmaceuticals. These are driven by high level of innovation on a continuous and constant basis. We also have labor intensive goods. That is where, in spite of the progress in automation and mechanization, human factor is extremely important in developing the products and in designing the products, and of course in manufacturing them in cost efficient way. Textiles and apparel, furniture, and manufacturing that supports various other industries, these become the labor intensive goods type of industries. We also have labor intensive services, which is wholesale and retail trade, transport and storage, and healthcare. There are some research intensive goods, which are mining, basic metals, agriculture, energy, which we have seen in the previous uh, lecture. Then we have regional processing. There are some activities, some industries that are best located in the consumption markets or as well as in the production regions. Food and beverage, fabricated metal products, paper and paper products, glass, cement, ceramics, rubber and plastics, these belong to these classes. This classification was developed by McKinsey Global Institute, and I have partially modified it. It is indicative but reflects the string of factors that determine the type of each industry. As you can guess, the leadership requirements of one type of industry are somewhat different from the leadership requirements of another type of industry, although certain common hard skills and soft skills are required. Hard skills are likely to be much more industry specific, whereas soft skills are likely to be much more generic in terms of cross industry application. Globalization basically is driven by 6 economic factors, as this slide presents. The first is access to technologies, access to natural resources, access to finance, access to consumption markets, access to workforce, and access to factories. When India started developing, one of the first globalization moves done by the government and of course the industry was to access the technologies that are available in the developed world, be it the United Kingdom, United States, or in later times Japan. And that is the pathway in which global corporations also enter an emerging market. So technology is one of the most important and relevant bridges between different types of countries and different types of markets. Access to natural resources is a powerful driver for multinational corporations to spread their wings across the various geographies. Many reasons for Indian companies going into other regions or other companies getting into India was driven by the access to natural resources. Access to finance is also another important aspect of globalization. With economic liberalization that has taken place from 1992, we have seen huge foreign direct investment flows into India. Today we have record levels of foreign direct investments into India, which has happened because the country has been opened up for foreign direct investments, and investors globally are also looking for stable markets which are growth oriented and markets which can be relied upon. That's why investments flow into Indian greenfield companies, brownfield companies, and also into the stock markets. Another powerful driver, a driver as powerful as finance and technology and resources, is the consumption market that exists in a nation. Beyond import export trade, the strength and size of the consumption market really determines the entry of global behemoths into a particular nation. Amazon has entered India because of the huge market that the country offered for electronic commerce, and the company foresaw that a few decades earlier. Walmart also entered subsequently because they felt that there's a huge untapped market in e-commerce in India. Access to workforce. The work patterns in developed countries have changed over time. People are more oriented towards service and less oriented towards production. People are more oriented towards liberal education than on STEM education. As a result, global companies require workforce which is very strong in STEM skills, that is science, technology, engineering, and management skills, and also workforce which understands quality standards but could offer those standards at lower cost levels. So access to workforce, talented working pool, is an extremely important driver of the globalization. Establishment of factories and running them is dependent on other factor advantages like land, water, taxes, people, and incentives, as well as ease of doing business in a jurisdiction. In this paradigm of uneven distribution of economic factors across the globe covering production and consumption, globalization is an essential part of global economy. Enabling access is one of the policy instruments governments the world over have to promote mutual exchanges between nations. Enlightened governments always think that we should not foreclose options for access. The more we give an access, the more we also can get access to what other nations can offer. So, opening up of markets for investments, for example, has helped India receive foreign investments but also enable stronger manufacturing base, stronger development base, which could again produce goods and services for the global partners. So, it is a kind of a virtuous paradigm of globalization. But globalization has non-economic factors also. Pankaj Ghemawat has developed what we call the CAGE network, which considers a broader proximate distance framework to explain the concept that there are certain non-economic factors. Of course, one of the CAGE factors is economic. However, there are other factors. The proximate distance framework says that there are ideological factors, that is, ideological proximity between nations is extremely important for globalization, which is one of the reasons why certain countries do not receive the level of investments and the level of technology or even the entry of foreign corporations due to ideological considerations. Then we have got governmental considerations. Government to government arrangements have been in the past instrumental in enhancing the level of globalization. The relationship India had with former USSR and the other Eastern European companies have been phenomenally helpful in developing the industrial base and promoting the first leg of globalization for the Indian industry. So, government to government relations are extremely important. India's relationship with the Japanese government, for example, is opening up the bullet train systems for entry into India. Then the political configurations. Political ideologies can bring economies together but also can separate economies. Geographic considerations are important, but they are important relatively with reference to certain product types. Certain products can be shipped all across the world without any issue and without any risk to the shelf life. On the other hand, for certain products, it may be irrelevant to try to ship them through long distances. For example, water for injection, which is a small vial having sterile water. Would it make sense to produce that in a far off country and then ship it to another far off country? Therefore, there are certain geographic considerations. Border nations need not necessarily mean that trade can be very easy across the border nations. In fact, there are restrictions on border nation investments because not all border nations are friendly to the country. Then we have cultural proximity. And it is not necessary that we should have cultural proximity to form a trade bloc or a regional bloc. BRICS is a bloc of different countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And the cultural differences are very strong, the geographical distances are very strong. But there has been some economic rationale and development rationale that underlined the establishment of BRICS as a trade bloc. It was a non-regional trade bloc. Social forces are also unique to each society because each society is bound by centuries of cohabitation. So the 6 economic factors that have been considered earlier, to repeat: technologies, natural resources, finance, markets, labor, and factories, and the 6 proximate non-economic factors that are considered now: ideological, governmental, political, geographic, cultural, and social. Together, these 12 factors constitute a complex paradigm of globalization. To believe, therefore, that the soft skills of a leader can make a leader a global leader, and that global leader can make a corporation a global corporation, would be a facile viewpoint of globalization and global leadership. So, to be able to be an effective global leader, we need to have business acumen as well as relational acumen. Business acumen gets reflected in terms of the technological savviness which a leader possesses, the resource sensitivity which a leader possesses, the financial agility he is able to bring to the business, the customer centric approach, the people-oriented approach, and the value-additive nature of the leadership. These are extremely important to add strength to the business acumen which a leader must have. From the relational point of view, the leader must be pragmatic. He or she should be compliant with different jurisdictions. The leader should be apolitical, and the leader should also have strong socio-cultural moorings of respective regions. It is not a generic industry level or a firm level capability. It is something that transcends all these industry, firm level, or even national level differences, but a set of deep dwelling competencies that could enable globally competitive and globally sustainable products and services. Then only a corporation can grow globally, and that needs to be fulfilled through the organizational network which global leadership can develop within the country as well as across nations. So let's consider each of these factors in some detail. Being technology savvy is probably the basic foundation for global leadership. A leader can establish and lead a globally competitive and globally sustainable firm only with technological edge. Let's take the case of NVIDIA. Jensen Huang co-founded NVIDIA in 1993 with the focus on a single niche, which is building powerful computer chips to create graphics for fast-moving video games. While video games drove growth relentlessly, the founder began investing billions of dollars much ahead of the times in R&D for high-performance computer chips. As a result, the chip player became very strong player in the computers and computing devices. Technology and business vision enabled NVIDIA to get to market by mid-2010, ahead of today's hype on artificial intelligence, AI-focused chips. They began to dominate the nascent market. Now NVIDIA chips power several futuristic products such as autonomous cars, robots, drone aircraft, and dozens of other high-tech tools, apart from smart devices. He was voted consistently to the top spot in various surveys, and in HBR's list of best performing CEOs in 2019, he was rated not only for the financial performance but also for corporate responsibility. So technological savviness of the founder of NVIDIA has enabled NVIDIA become a technology leader and also a global leader in its chosen business path. The truly effective global leader is one who is also a technology leader. So what are the lessons from global technology leaders? I would be talking about one example of each of these supporting drivers for global leadership, and then talk about the takeaways we can take from such global leadership demonstration. One, the leader must be able to identify the nexus between technology and business, which NVIDIA has done, and also invest in technology for mega trends. Long before computing chips became important, the founder started investing in them, and long before artificial intelligence became important, he started investing in AI driven chips. So invest in technology to cater to the future mega trends. Collaborate upstream and downstream. It became a huge B2B success story because it was able to negotiate, discuss, and have win-win alliances with the end product makers as also material suppliers on both sides of the manufacturing chain. Invest in manufacturing infrastructure, because once you hit it right, you require these things in millions and billions. So you have to invest in high quality, top of the class manufacturing infrastructure. And this process never stops. You need to identify the next technology and business mega trends so that there is a continuous upliftment of the technological foundation as also the business direction and growth potential for the company. That is the lessons we get from the global technology leader. Google's parent Alphabet, Amazon's Blue Origin, Tesla's SpaceX, they also reflect similar pursuit of technology and business mega trends. The other aspect of global leadership is being resource sensitive. I have demonstrated here how General Electric does that in the industrial products arena. It took the lead a few years ago to begin embedding the concepts of circular economy, not only in its operations but also how its equipment can be operated with sustainability by its users. In this graph, you can see, which is of course sourced from GE, you can see how you can have 4 levels. One, the equipment which are built with secondary materials. Two, operating the equipment while also operating the resources. How we can service, circulate equipment and parts. And finally, how we can circulate materials. You can see the circular economy operating in each of these levels and amongst the 4 levels. That's circular economy for you. This is a busy slide. You can spend more time to go through this further. So hardware and software can be combined in the engineering industry to support sustainable materials management, a topic which we studied earlier. But this gives one very specific example of an established industrial corporation deploying sustainable materials management all across the product life cycle, from building of the basic equipment to its use and the underlying materials cycle, from design to final disposal, so to say. So what are the lessons we get from a global resource leader? We should be very clear about resources. We should be open about controlling climate change, and we should deploy smarter chemistry. So Apple's environmental strategy is a great example of how a global resource leader would function. From 2019, Apple began publishing the Environmental Responsibility Report. And if you go through that report, you will find many ways in which Apple, as a technology leader, is also trying to be a resource leader. And at the core of this is a focus on resources, a focus on climate change, and use of smarter chemistry. So as far as materials is concerned, Apple is transiting to recycled or renewable materials, so that productivity can be maximized, and also material efficiency, product longevity, and recovery can be maximized. Renewable energy is used so that Apple and Apple suppliers can transit to 100% renewable energy at some point of time. Low carbon design of its products and components is another feature of the resource leadership. Energy efficiency, reducing the energy use at corporate and supplier facilities. Innovation in terms of transitioning to safer chemistries, safer materials, and chemical innovations much beyond what is required. Assessment and management methodologies, that is, even if you have to use chemicals, you use them in a very safe and human healthy manner. That is important. And also take care of environmental empathy while doing the entire production cycle. Mapping and engagement, create a comprehensive inventory of chemicals used by suppliers to make Apple products. Zero waste policy, eliminate waste sent to landfill at manufacturing facilities as well as corporate offices, data centers, and retail stores. Landfills are one of the sources of long-term pollution of the earth resources. So landfills is not a good solution. Zero waste is the solution which companies must aim at. Similarly, water stewardship, reduce freshwater use, improve the quality of water discharge, and demonstrate leadership by protecting shared water resources. So Apple is seen as a leader in iPhones and other products, but the leadership is also seen in the environmental responsibility and resource responsibility. The third aspect of global leadership is being financially agile and fit. I have given here 6 companies which are top 3 global by market cap as on August 1, 2019, and top 3 global by market cap as of March 31, 2019. Microsoft US, Apple US, Amazon, which are all in the range of $1,000 billion market cap, are led by leaders who have demonstrated financial agility and fitness in their corporations. Companies which are similarly placed in other fields, that is trade, then Sinopec Group, and in oil and energy, you will find that similar capabilities exist, although they are mid-range compared to the mega range which the technology companies have. The CEOs who led market capitalization rankings have been amongst the top-ranked HBR leaders in 2018 and 2019. Providing financial fitness and agility to the global corporations is a big task of global leaders. There could be vary in terms of the constitution and the characteristic of the industry, but the ability to ensure financial strength for the companies is one of the tasks, because the more global you become, the more vulnerable you would be to different types of risks. So financial fitness and agility is extremely important. And what are the lessons we learned from global financial leaders? 1. Financial resilience, including risk management, cross-border regulatory compliance, currency expression and hedging for international transactions, system efficiency in integrating diverse countries and work practices, analytical intelligence, understanding both financial and non-financial data, tax data, having advanced data analytics, and harnessing digital innovation for productivity. Business partnership, maintaining healthy independence of CEOs and CXOs, parent and regional CEOs and CXOs, accountability between the board and the CEO, and communicating finance organization wide in business and operational terms, and agile talent that is not only finance savvy but also capable of being business partners and analytical in the approach, fusing rigorous transaction capability and accounting with development finance, and deep knowledge of local as well as global financial markets. These are the capabilities of global financial leaders. They should be able to handle in financial terms the cross movement of materials, products, financial resources, and people resources in an environment characterized by volatile exchange rates. When you have materials sourced from one currency jurisdiction, manufacture them in another currency jurisdiction, export to multiple currency jurisdictions across the world, the translation of revenues and other costs into the balance sheet, one singular balance sheet, is a challenge. How you do that and how you protect your financial resources against the vulnerability of exchange and trade volatility is a great leadership task for financial managers. So they should have a wide spectrum of deep finance skills. Another important aspect is being customer centric. Global leaders and global firms have global customers. They should understand what customers need and not what the legacy ordered us to do. Satya Nadella of Microsoft has been a great customer centric leader. He realized as soon as he took over that the customers have gone beyond desktop systems. They are looking at mobile operating systems or even cloud operating systems to be able to perform. And also, proprietariness of the operating system provides only limited licensing fees, but the real success lies in making the operating system seamless across multiple devices and multiple technologies. That's what Satya Nadella began implementing, and as a result, Microsoft moved up the market capitalization table as also in terms of the overall valuation table in terms of technology classification. That is one thing which he brought in terms of customer centricity. As far as Steve Jobs is concerned, his customer centricity is legendary. And he believed that people don't know what they want until you show it to them. So he thinks that the leadership responsibility is to imagine what the customer really wanted but had no means of expressing that need, let alone asking for it vocally. Global leaders such as Steve Jobs at Apple, Satya Nadella at Microsoft, and Anna Nayanmurthy at Infosys were phenomenal in understanding the consumer needs. The way Anna Nayanmurthy read the requirements of the multiple clients across the world for efficient and seamless understanding of the projects and provision of solutions led to the global delivery model, which we discussed in an earlier lecture. It is a customer centricity. So what do we take from these global centric leaders and others as our lessons? Thinking and acting like a startup is one of the hallmarks of customer centric leaders. They experience the customer's life. They identify customers' known and unknown problems. They make technology solve the identified problems, and they deploy design thinking so that these problems can be discovered or the needs can be discovered and solutions can be developed, aligning and galvanizing the entire organization passionately around the problem and the solution, and also develop a triad of desirability, feasibility, and viability. It should be desirable for the customer, it should be feasible for the company to manufacture, and it should be viable for both the company as well as the firm to be able to do that. Then only entrepreneurial success would take place. And for big corporations, global corporations to be successful, this type of entrepreneurial thinking, which is customer driven, is extremely important. When we say customer driven, as Steve Jobs emphasizes, it is not necessarily expressed in open terms by the customers. Customer centricity is understanding beforehand, even before the customer can discover what the customer needs. So from mimicking nature to synthesizing novel products, customer centricity offers a whole spectrum of solutions. And the more universal the solution is, the more global the corporation can become. The other aspect of global leadership is being people oriented. There is a business roundtable which comprises the leaders who head large global corporations. They are displayed here through this image. The Business Roundtable issued a statement on August 2009, that's called the purpose of a corporation. It argued that companies should no longer advance only the interests of shareholders. Instead, the group said they must also invest time and effort in their employees, protect the environment, and deal fairly and ethically with their suppliers. Global corporations which emphasize innovation and markets are crucially dependent on people to make that happen, which means that people orientation is an essential aspect of global leadership. Global leaders, as reflected in this statement, engage seriously and empathetically with their employees to press on with their global aspirations. While standard aspects of people oriented leadership is common across local leaders as well as regional leaders and global leaders, the difference is that real people oriented leaders make the people self reliant and self assured. They don't provide only incentives, they make people learn and earn the incentives by themselves so that they are confident that they can undertake the job and also have rewarding careers. So they assure economic and social security for the employees. That is the fundamental baseline activity. Then most importantly, they invest in learning and development of employees so that employees feel confident, and irrespective of the transformations technology undergoes and industry itself undergoes, they would be in a position to leapfrog into those aspects. Then building communities of employee habitats, because developing roots is extremely important. Employees who jump from one company to another continuously take away a lot of institutional knowledge with them willy-nilly. So if you support the communities in which employees live, you will be able to develop the roots and also bonds between the communities and employee habitats, and of course the firm itself. And we should, just as we provide for the future generation of leaders, future generation of managers in our own corporation, we should also help the employees have future development in their families. So encouraging critical skills in students is extremely important. So taking up STEM education as a overall objective is one of the important aspects of people oriented leadership. Then letting the company accept huge number of apprenticeships and internships beside on the job training helps the company connect globally with various types of interests, not only the student interests but also the academic interests, governmental interests, and not-for-profit interests. It also enables operator level excellence, which starts coming from the student days itself, and workforce diversity is increased when open apprenticeship and open internship bring in students of different categories, and at times these internships could be also for experienced people. When they come in, the diversity level in the organization increases and people learn from each other. So people orientation, apart from whatever soft skills and human relations aspects we saw in the earlier discussions, focus on making the people and the communities self-reliant and self-assured. Through that, bonds are developed between the communities and the company, employees and the communities and the company in a very robust manner. The other aspect of global leadership is being value accretive. Along with global leadership and global cooperation come the phenomenon of mergers and acquisitions, because the opportunities exist in various parts of the world to acquire. At times you need to acquire newer companies to enhance your market reach or specialization depth. The case study of Procter & Gamble, which is a diversified FMCG product company, and Gillette, which is the men's grooming products company, is an excellent case study of how merger and acquisition aspects could be value accretive. Many times M&As tend to be value destructive. This particular case represented one of the largest M&As effected in 2005. At that time, Gillette was about just 1/5 of P&G, and stock price was 84% of P&G. That is, relatively it was valued better. It was a USD 57 billion deal, and P&G paid 20% premium to Gillette stock price. However, after the acquisition, P&G's stock price reached a high of 128. That is doubled twice, because the acquisition built value. Each company recognized what the other company could do and let that company enhance their capabilities in that core domain and also offer products which strengthen their business profile. So these are some of the aspects of the strategy that was at work post M&A. So the P&G's competencies in women care products and Gillette's competencies in men's grooming products were combined to make sure that P&G could have a broad spectrum of personal products for the entire population spectrum. So it was just not cost synergies. The value synergies, strategic and operating synergies were aimed at in this particular case. So deciding to do an M&A for global growth is just only one aspect of a global leader's responsibility. Generating the real value from the M&A activity happens when you choose the right M&A target which has the best complementarity and best fit, not have a standardized playbook to implement the M&A, not have only cost savings as the focus but also have value accretion as the focus. These are the guiding principles for an M&A being successful in a global context. The lessons we learned from value accretive global leaders is that we should look for complementarity, product market talent, and gain from mutual leveraging. Produce scalability in size, expandability in scope. Both scale and scope must grow out of M&A. Financial superstructure of M&A must rest on strategic and operational foundations. Many times, M&A value propositions finally are reduced to EPS calculations. That this is my EPS pre-merger, both companies EPS, and after merger the combined EPS would be this much, and this is the increase, the CAGR or the X times the increase. But that financial superstructure has to rest on solid strategic and operational fundamentals. Otherwise, the EPS calculations won't work out. Very importantly, the acquiring company must understand the culture of the acquired company and preserve and grow the value of the acquisition it has taken. It is not merely the physical assets the company is acquiring, it also is the people asset, and they should never be dispensed with in the name of cost savings. Tailor the method of acquisition. It could be bolt-on acquisition, complementing acquisition, consolidating, transformational, opportunistic, whatever the name you give to the acquisition. It must be a purposeful and purposive acquisition. And the organic capabilities must be supplemented with the acquisition so that the exponential growth that the M&A deal targets is actually achieved. So value accretion is more than EPS calculation. We need to look at companies such as IBM, Cisco, Pfizer, Gilead, which belong to different domains but have used M&A as an appropriate tool to enhance business scale and scope by a series of acquisitions. Of course, the companies differ in the way in which they have been able to build value accretive M&A transactions, but the overall secular direction of growth and value accretion through global leadership remains. IT and pharmaceuticals going forward seem to be very good areas where there could be global leadership through value accretive M&A play. And global leadership must also be very pragmatic. Pragmatism is the approach of evaluating anything based on practical realities and conducting oneself accordingly. Pragmatism is good leadership behavior. A leader who is dogmatic and dogged in his or her views is unlikely to be a good leader, even less so a good global leader. So there is great virtue in the global leadership contest for being pragmatic. Warren Buffett, Berkshire CEO, he has got a very simple and focused approach to investments and very practical approach to succession and grooming deputies. As a result, he could generate wealth with ease and could channel wealth towards philanthropy. Satya Nadella, who is the Microsoft CEO, we talked about him earlier also, he could transform from a proprietary to shared approach the corporation. He could also overcome the desktop legacy for aggressive cloud move. Therefore, he made Microsoft products friendly and adaptive to global business requirements, which began to experience different types of competitive offerings. So he reasserted the Microsoft USP through his openness towards the emerging environment. Tim Cook, who is the Apple CEO, he assumed a more inclusive global market outlook. Steve Jobs, for example, thought that India was a market which need not be looked at by Apple because it has got its own cost and price stringency. On the other hand, Tim Cook, when he took over as Apple CEO, felt that India is too large a market to be ignored and too helpful market to be ignored. So he made India a big part of his globalization approach. And he also moved from the legacy of small is simple to big is better. As a result, he could integrate markets and market segments and customer clusters which were perceived to be difficult, such as India in terms of market cluster and people who look for large sized connectivity devices into the Apple market base. So the marketing and manufacturing network accordingly widened. So this is global leadership. So pragmatism in strategy and execution, which means reappraising the vital elements that drove the strategy and execution thus far, is an important aspect of pragmatism for global leaders. What are the lessons from pragmatic leaders? They respond to the requirements changes in different jurisdictions. There could be changes in investment requirements, licensing, capital market, and tax. They moderate parent jurisdiction towards others. They provide more independence to the subsidiaries, more responsiveness to the local conditions. They differentiate business to business relationships from government to government roller coasters. They work with local resources in different countries. They become national corporate citizens. They become responsible corporate citizens in different geographies. As a result, local talent is utilized as much as possible. Expat managers are reduced in count as well as preponderance as much as possible, and they enable knowledge and practice transfers across regions so that there is opportunity for even the parent corporation to learn from the local learnings that happen. They also adapt products and services to diverse local needs. Localizing global products to meet usage conditions and customer preferences has broadened the product spectrum. GE could do that effectively in its medical devices, and Japan could do it effectively in the automobile designs when they came into India. So remarkable patience and understanding to develop businesses in the local nations is extremely important for global corporations. Global leaders at helm in those countries did make difference for all such companies. Global leadership being compliant. Global compliance requires a leadership that ensures the quality of global ethics and compliance program. We need to have an appropriate organizational culture, corporate citizenship and responsibility, robust governance, and clean reputation. It is almost similar to the ESG concept I talked about earlier. Tata Sphere and Wipro are two Indian companies that find a place in Ethisphere's ranking of the world's most ethical companies, and that shows the way for more Indian companies to participate and also get recognized. Ethisphere's proprietary ethics quotient is the world's acknowledged ethical survey methodology. It's an assessment process having 200 questions plus on culture, environment, social practices, ethics and compliance activities, governance, diversity, and other initiatives which support a strong value chain for a company. It reflects on a strong operating framework of the company, a belief that financial performance and ethical performance must go hand in hand. These are the bedrocks of the ethical survey. There were 128 honorees representing 21 countries and 50 industries in the 2019 World's Most Ethical Companies list, and in that Tata Steel and Wipro figured. Not only that, a company from the mining industry figured in this list. Normally mining is considered to be very labor intensive and not particularly helpful in terms of being seen as a governance oriented industrial infrastructure. However, the fact that a mining company entered ethical ranking, that too at the topmost level globally, indicates that irrespective of the nature of the industry and irrespective of the legacy practices that were prevalent in that industry, it is possible for companies to become ethical and be compliant regionally as well as globally. And the Ethisphere CEO says that leading CEOs and organizations continue to prove our long held hypothesis that conducting ethical business is the key to maximizing profits. The large cap index was exceeded in terms of performance by the ethical companies that were chosen as part of the Ethisphere ethics quotient survey. So I talked about the entry of the mining company into the ethical ranking. General Motors says that at General Motors, we are determined to lead the automotive industry in creating a world with zero crashes, that means safest automobile, zero emissions, and zero congestion, and to doing it with integrity. That is the statement from General Motors Chairman and CEO Mary Barra. Only when the leader at the helm of the corporation sets a standard that is difficult to emulate, but one that must be aspired for, can you drive compliance in an organization to the highest level. So ethical synergy of Tata Steel we can see in terms of these 6 factors. 1, climate compliance. 2nd, ethical compliance. 3rd is green leadership. 4th is risk management, sustainability leadership, and workplace safety. These are the 6 factors that drive any ethical corporation and also any ESG corporation. It is also important for a corporation, particularly for a global corporation, to be apolitical. This book, Global Corporate Power, and also another, the Political Power of Global Corporation, provide very interesting insights into how global corporations could try to control rather than compete in markets. Global corporations enter new markets with the basic view of serving those markets. But over a period of time, when the global corporations are big in the countries, they became controlling interests. They start expressing their economic interests through lobbying for public policy changes. To be a true global corporate citizen, global companies and global leadership needs to be apolitical. They should avoid the interface between corporations and governments, which could have any trace of political bias. All interactions must be for professional considerations and for enhancing the value of the government, of the nation, of the society, as much as the value of the company itself. So this is a book which people who are interested in political economy are encouraged to study further. The lessons from the apolitical corporation are: an apolitical state looks for equilibrium, equidistance, equipoised, and equiponderant. The corporate leader who is running a corporation in an apolitical state must be looking for equilibrium, that is, the ability to remain in a state of composure and calm irrespective of global political developments. He or she should also have a policy and capability of equidistance, ability to be unbiased and remain unattached with any political thought or control of market factors. The leader must be equipoised, ability to be open to all relevant ideas irrespective of the origins, irrespective of the regions. Equiponderant, an ability to give equal consideration to all factors of corporate action. When corporations limit themselves to this kind of objective and apolitical functioning, they would be true global corporate citizens, and it is an objective which is well worth following for global corporations so that they will become respected citizens. Another important aspect of global leadership is being a good socio-cultural corporation. It is not only running ethically, running through environmental empathy and running through good corporate governance, but also being felt as one local entity as part of the entire national milieu. Hindustan Unilever Limited is an excellent example of a foreign corporation that became more Indian than Indian corporations, using local talent for expansion, using local supply chain, using local marketing mix, including communication methodologies. Hindustan Unilever became more Indian, as I would say, than any Indian corporation. Socio-cultural commonality and socio-cultural bonding is extremely important for global leadership. From the early 1950s, this type of development took place in Hindustan Unilever, and more companies of course are following. And to be able to tap both India and Bharat in this vast country, the company needed to innovate and several technological and managerial approaches. For example, Project Telecalling was used for urban areas. Project Columbus was used for rural areas, that is expanding the distribution reach to over 150 million rural consumers in 2013. And the projects were not merely to boost sales and volumes, but to become part of the community through widespread visibility and providing accessibility and availability of its products. And in many cases, as the CSR began taking roots, they also became partners in the community outreach programs. So from the socio-cultural cooperation, what are the lessons we can learn? We should be able to adopt certain practices, adapt ourselves to the practices, and also basically admire what the national culture, what the local culture represent. The greatness of the culture must be adopted rather than look for straitjacketing in a one-form concept, different regional and local cultures. And that involves recognizing the social mores, understanding the social mores, recognizing the cultural ties and deepening them, understanding the affinity that could be developed with the language, be respectful of religious practices and sentiments, understand work ethos and work through them so that the local work ethos can be utilized appropriately to ensure greater strength and wealth for the corporation. So from global standards and expectations to regional autonomy and accountability, there seems to be a lot of difference. However, these two can actually be combined to have hybrid organizations which are both empowered and aligned. So global standards, when merged with local talent, you get a hybrid organization. And that is what a good socio-cultural cooperation, which is part of the local community and local society, does. From a workforce leadership perspective and also from a product market framework, the global cooperation needs to imbibe the socio-cultural elements of working. At times, these could be even greater determinants of the success of a global cooperation than any of the factors we discussed so far. Of course, having those strengths obviously leads to a better socio-cultural positioning in the regional economy and regional society. To be able to do that, we should provide appropriate autonomy for the regions and appropriate linkages with the parent corporation. We should also provide appropriate cross communication between the parent and the regions, and also movement of people from different regions to the parent and vice versa. I have talked about the illustration of Hindustan Unilever's movement of Indian leaders to global positionings. That ensures better understanding of the socio-cultural requirements at a headquarters level or at a parent level. That is more than just utilizing the capabilities of Harish Manwani or Paranjapi. It involves understanding the socio-cultural phenomenon, because the local regime or the local market gets a voice in the distanced parent headquarters through such movements. Similarly, when an expat manager comes and works hand in hand with the local managers, both parties understand the different strengths of parent as well as the regional subsidiary. So socio-cultural unification, standardization and hybridization is a challenge of global leadership. So what is a globally networked corporation? A globally networked corporation is which is at once global and also at once local, which is combining the best practice of both the corporations, global and local, into one singular corporate structure and systemic philosophy. They have specialized design clusters, but they have diffused manufacturing facilities. They have networked supply chains. They have cross-cultural talent base. They believe in green growth and sustainability, and they watch themselves for ethics and compliance. These are the hallmarks of a globally networked corporation. They cover the 6 economic aspects which we have discussed and also illustrated through specific examples, that is technology, resources, capital, markets, people and value on one hand, and the 4 relational aspects which we also discussed: pragmatism, compliance, apolitical behavior and socio-cultural behavior. The responsibility for global leadership lies in sustaining a globally competitive corporation through the application of these factors. So 10 factors, 6 economic and 4 relational, determine how global leadership can be sustained in corporations. Thank you.